All right, so we'll call the select board meeting to order for May 22nd, 2023. Announcements, this meeting is being broadcast on local cable TV and recorded for rebroadcast on local cable channels and on the internet. The meeting is also accessible by remote participation as noted on the bottom of the agenda. Memorial Day Parade, Monday, May 29th at 10:30, followed by ceremony outside the GAR Memorial Library. How would people get updates, Angus, on the town website? If there's anything that's going to...
Yeah, we have another working group meeting tomorrow morning. All the preparations have been going well. As we've done the last couple of years, we'll send around a parade packet to everybody confirmed to participate tomorrow, which will provide the order of where we went out and what order they do in the parade. So anyone participating has been getting correspondence from the town office. If there's others who want to learn more, just I don't know that we have much more on the website, but we'll definitely do a reminder, make sure that people get multiple reminders, but there's not a lot of information beyond the flyer.
Okay, so people that are participating are already doing
yeah.
We put out an announcement on the website if anyone was interested in participating, as well as we've called anyone in the past. We put it out on the sign. We can put out an announcement later this week after if there's any updates from our meeting tomorrow. And then.
Okay, great. Call for volunteers, FY24 positions on boards, commissions, and committees on the website on the volunteer tab on the homepage. I looked at that and it looks like we have two committees that only have 3 people on them, that we only have 2 people actually. So there's a person missing on the Cable Advisory Committee and the River Access Committee. With smaller committees, it's really important to have full membership. Also, the planning board needs an associate member, which is important if one of the members is not present for voting. And the FinCom is not listed; they're down member, right?
It is listed.
I didn't see it on the webpage today.
Oh, I don't know what that's in the packet.
Yeah, I was just looking at the webpage. So those are just some examples of positions that need to be filled. Reminder to subscribe for emailed town agendas, news announcements at wnewbury.org/subscribe. And that's any other announcements? Regular business, request for a 1-day liquor license. Spring Family Festival at 52 Ash Street, June 10th from 11 to 3, New England Equine Rescue. Carolyn's here. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? Do you want me to just explain a little bit about what it is? Would that be helpful? So last year was the first time we did a bigger spring festival, and we have food and craft beer and lots of kids activities, and people come and tour the farm and do kids games. It's really centered on family fun and getting to know a little bit more about the rescue and what we do for horses and donkeys. So we're going to do the same thing that we did last time, hopefully. When we had the liquor license last time, you guys had just requested that we put the beer in a separate section, sort of cordon it off so that it was very clear who was going to be approaching to purchase the beverages. And we did that. So we plan to do that again this year. I will submit the tip certified. I've been in touch with them. The people that are bartending, they just don't know their schedules until a little later. So it's been hard to figure out which of the couple of bartenders that work at a particular restaurant will be with us. But she's supposed to be finding out her schedule and confirming which 2 will be there. And then I will send those in, just like I did last time. And I believe I still owe you the fee, but the only other thing I think that I owe you is the insurance, but we had hoped, because it is rain dependent, our insurance company she does all of the information ahead of time. She just doesn't bind it until the week before, so we can kind of look at the forecast, because we're a nonprofit and trying to save money in every way that we can. So we just bind it that week before, and then I sent over the certification that it was bound with insurance to you guys prior to the event. So hopefully that would be okay. I'm not sure if that still would be okay this time around.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So everything went smoothly last year?
Yeah, it was great. We had a wonderful time.
I was surprised when I saw 500 to 1,000 people. That seems like a really big crowd.
It was just over 1,000 people last year, and we
Goodness.
have police and fire trucks in attendance. We have, for the kids to, touch a truck. We have a sports car that's gonna be there for the kids to climb on. Trying to think what else. We have a bunch of activities for them, like we let them make crafts and go into the arena and pretend to be horses and kind of traipse all around. It was really, really fun. It was a wonderful turnout.
How much parking do you have? So you're able.
Last year it wasn't we park in that front field. There's a whole, we were a little nervous about that, and we worked with the chief of police last year to make sure that it was, we met with them and reviewed the whole area. We did not have a problem because we were able to park in that front field to the left. And then we put up signs all along one side of the road that said no parking. So they only could park on one side of the road to make sure that traffic wasn't impeded.
Any
So,
questions?
Chief, there was no, from your perspective, parking? No, okay.
Great.
And that sort of goes to one of my questions. The chief responded, said, police and fire will be present during the event, no concerns, but they actually monitoring traffic, or are they in there with trucks and kids?
Last year I met with them prior, and they said as long as we put up the signs and had everything the way that they wanted it to be, they didn't need the traffic detail. If that's something that we needed, then if that's what he felt we needed, then I could certainly do that as well.
The chief, if it's needed, you're there, you will then address it. If it's,
Yeah, and I'll pivot it anyways to make sure if we need to get somebody in there to do traffic, we will, but last year we were able to manage it by pointing off one side of the roadway, and they have a good amount of space.
I walked by that day. It was busy though, too.
Yeah,
It was,
yeah.
it was interesting. It was no worse than cutting that Christmas tree farm the day.
Yeah,
after.
right.
It said the tip certified, are gonna be carded. They're gonna card all patrons, or
Yes.
they make judgment calls? Okay.
Well, there's just, what we do is we have the bake sale and the food, and soda and water in a different section so that anybody can go up to that one. And then we had the beer sort of cordoned off with gates with a smaller entrance that they could go into that area. And that was only for people 21 plus, and that was the carded area as well.
But they do card everybody. It's not like.
Oh, yeah. Of course. Yes.
You just think that avoids potential issues if everybody.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else? Would you have anything to add on this?
No, I didn't.
Okay. We want to make a motion?
Yeah, move that we approve the one-day liquor license for the Spring Family Festival at the New England Equine Rescue Facility on Ash Street.
Pending insurance.
And yeah, pending insurance.
A second.
Second, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Hope it goes
Thank you
well.
so much. I hope we get to see you there.
Sure.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Okay, the next item is Ride to End Alzheimer's, June 3rd. We have Kevin
Yes,
here.
hi. Yeah, hi. I'm Roger Mass with Cadence Sports here for Alzheimer's.
Okay, I'm not seeing the, on the phone.
Yeah, he's,
No, so there's two. So Chelsea
okay,
is here for ALS.
Oh, there he is.
Oh, wow, Michelle's on there too. Great.
So there were some questions from last meeting.
Like, what, we doing Alzheimer's and ALS? There's two different applications.
There's two different
ALS.
ALS.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The first one is ALS. The first one is the ALS.
All right. Since I already said that, let's stick with that. People can handle that.
Which one are we on with? I just need to know.
The Ride to End Alzheimer's on June 3rd.
Okay.
So I did have a question on this. There was something about,
So this was not the one that was continued from last.
right,
Sorry.
This is a more significant duration through the town. Comes over the bridge and then comes up over and.
yeah, so there was
Turkey Hill.
something in your email, Roger, that said you would love to hire these,
Yeah,
and I'm not finding it
and
right.
further that discussion.
Yeah, can you
Well, look,
explain
I-
that?
Yes, so what I'm trying to do is I put together a wish list of every place I'd like to hire an officer. And if
Oh.
the resources are there, that's what I would do. I'd rather start locally than having to bring anybody else in from county or any of that. So there are 2 posts in West Newbury that I would like to have. But again, I'm a little out of context because I don't know the local traffic flow and how heavy that's going to be on a Saturday. But it's basically the right onto Rogers Street from Garden Street, and then the left onto South Street from Turkey Hill. And again, I'm doing this from Atlanta, so I may even have the jurisdictional boundaries wrong. But looking at my list, I throw it out there. I get some feedback. Yes, we can do this. No, we can't. And then take it from there. So that's just a part. That email was a follow-up for those
Okay.
two
For those
posts. But yeah, but basically our route through town is about 5 miles. We'll be coming through there 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., give or take. And that is only on our 100-mile route distance. And currently there are 130 people signed up for that distance.
What are your thoughts about those locations? Chief?
So, yeah, my thoughts were we would need 1, maybe 2 officers to handle that. My biggest concern when I reached out to Roger back in January was that we have graduation that same day. So our
Yes.
resources are tied up with that. So I'm hoping that if you're looking to do it again next year, that we can maybe change the weekend. Because our graduation is the same time every year.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, this is our 26th year for this. So if we landed on top of graduation before, have we just been lucky this far?
Do you recall that before being the same?
Yeah, we just don't have the resources to do both complete
Has this happened in past years?
last year, yeah.
Oh, it did.
Yeah,
Okay.
Is this a reason to deny this? I mean, is that resulting in issues with the
We
Merrimack
can-
traffic?
we can do 2 detail officers that day, and we're
Yeah.
just gonna have to manage things a little, it's gonna be tight between the detail officers finishing there and then going over to Pentucket. We can make it work. Last year we had, I think, 6 officers who were involved.
So is this something that the applicant could hire their own?
I'd rather not us do it,
All right,
yeah.
okay.
But ultimately, maybe looking towards next year, it'd be nice to stagger the timeframe.
Okay, is there a way we can remember this for next year? Okay,
If we're all here, yeah.
Or maybe just make it a policy to block out any events in town which will require police or fire details.
on
graduation
graduation,
day.
are there any other, days of the year that would be comparable?
That's really it.
Okay.
Yeah, I put in a request to block it out earlier, but I know things have just been, we've all been shuffling around, just trying to manage the schedules.
So from a realistic standpoint, Roger, I don't know how many communities you have to negotiate with, but I'm guessing there's at least a dozen, maybe 20 different communities that you pass through.
Absolutely, yes.
And I don't know how somebody trying to arrange an organization like this makes sure that he doesn't conflict with any other event in any other community.
Yeah,
The
it's gonna be a
only,
challenge.
the only time that would happen would be never.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you kind of hope that some of that stuff gets vetted out through the permit process, that, you know, whatever internal organization that are looking at things, you know, kind of inform me of that, because I don't know how to look up graduations and all that stuff. But, you know, again, our footprint down there, we're a rules of the road ride. There's no traffic control at all. Those officers are for safety and visible presence. 130 people over 3 hours. I just don't think it's going to be a major impact to anything that's going on there. And I'll certainly advise everyone, you know, heads up through here, there's going to be some extra traffic. And I've got some support vehicles of my own that I can kind of put near there if we need any of that stuff. So
What time is graduation?
10:30, but we stayed down there about 8:30, 9 o'clock.
right on top of each other.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, one thing I would point out, Roger, that a lot of your email addresses are incorrect, and I think that might be part of why this didn't get caught when you first applied. So if you could get all the
Yes.
information from our town clerk, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of inherited this list from the New Hampshire chapter of Alzheimer's.
Sure.
And I would love to update it and make edits. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So I have a question too regarding the route and the way the route is explained. I know you have to deal with a lot of different communities, and you already made reference to maybe having jurisdictional limits confused or uncertain. From what I see on this listing here, there are roads. Part of the listing is a little confusing the way it's shown, but it shows routes that are in West Newbury as being in Haverhill, Merrimack, West Newbury. Unless I'm reading this wrong.
No,
And,
you're not reading it wrong. So this is last year's
Yeah,
jurisdictional column that another event guy did.
Okay.
And I left this here hoping that we would just clarify it. So,
okay,
I have spoken with all of those other communities. If I'm off a street or two on that, it's not necessarily the end of the world as long as we're looking at the police coverage is what's most important to me.
yeah. I guess just because this is something that, is in a public document here, it seems to me that at least for next year, it would be great to have somebody really review the listing and make sure that everything is shown.
It is already on my list for the next time I'm up there. I'm actually going to do it the week of this event because, Google's only so good at showing you boundaries. And so I want to drive it and notate that and clean it up. Absolutely.
One other thing, Roger, that we've been asking is that when there's a planned race like this, that signs be posted ahead of time so that residents are aware of potential traffic and they can plan accordingly. So is that something that
Yes.
you provide?
Absolutely. What day would you like them out?
How much do you think is enough notice? Like the week before?
I would say, it's a Saturday,
Yeah.
at the beginning of the week, I think. we're-
So early that week before, is that?
Yes. I've got staff arriving Tuesday morning because of Monday's holiday. So I
Yeah.
can probably get that stuff out early in the day Tuesday.
Okay,
We can put something out on the email blast Friday as well, just reminding people of this.
Okay, I think that'd be
next
good,
weekend,
because-
As well as graduation.
yeah.
So Wendy, just, this being a 100-mile ride,
Mhm.
and really not that many participants. I'm just wondering if it's, if there's a 5-mile run or a 10-mile run and there are 200 people and they pass through in a relatively short period of time is one thing, but this is currently just 130 entries. I'm guessing there'll be more than that, but I doubt.
No, I think it'll be about that. It was 140 last year.
Yeah, okay, so by the time it gets to West Newbury, people are gonna be so well spread out. There could be as many casual Saturday riders
Mhm.
on the same roads
I was
as
thinking the
there'll
same.
be in this particular event. To me,
Not gonna be noticeable.
yeah, I don't think there'll be, there'll be clusters, typically, I've ridden centuries before and, you'll be with a group of 3 or 4 other friends and you'll be tucked together, but that happens just in the course of normal riding anyway.
Yes.
So what do you think should be the cutoff? Because residents do complain after these races that, they,
After, certainly some races they do, but as I said, this.
so I'm asking what should be the cutoff? If it's less than 200 participants or more than 200 participants? what should be-
I don't know how you come up with a, I know you like rules. But I don't know how you come up with a rule that says that because, if it's a century, say it's a bike ride and it's a century and you're 2 miles into the century, people are really tightly packed.
Mhm.
If you're 50 miles into the century, people are spread out over a 20 miles range. And it's there's no longer a cluster and.
So what is the harm in the ride sponsor just putting a sign at each intersection?
Oh, just,
Saying road race Saturday, 8 to 10. I would like to see it to be part of the application to say if this, so I don't see any harm in it. And if it's easier to just have that be the rule, and if it's a hardship, then maybe we could say,
Yeah.
okay,
yeah,
you don't have to do it for this
Yeah.
race, but.
Shouldn't be a hardship.
It's definitely not a hardship. We put a large signage order in. The problem is timeline because those signs have to be branded and approved through graphics and all that. And I've already had them printed, but I can run down to Sign Depot or something and get something made. I mean, it's just coroplast, but I certainly am happy to do whatever your requirement is there.
That's something that we're trying to ask going forward because residents do object to it. So if it's not a hardship for you, that would be great if you could roll that in.
Okay.
Is that all right? I mean, maybe it's not necessary, but in terms of establishing a practice, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's good to have a reference point, but, at some point, again, there could be more traffic per minute or per hour, just from normal Saturday riders.
Yeah.
Than there would be for an event like this.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Or comments, Chris? No? Somebody want to make a motion?
Sure, I move that we approve the special event permit for the Ride to End Alzheimer's on June 3rd.
Second.
All right, further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you, Roger.
Thank you all very much.
Okay,
I'll follow up with Roger and make sure that we're covered on the public safety side.
okay,
Perfect. Thank you.
okay. We'll have to figure this out for next year, so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
So when was the application submitted?
I believe, was it Jeff's?
No, so it was submitted to us back in January. And we followed up with him and said to go through the proper channels before coming to public safety, because you all need to see it first.
Right, right.
Do they have the opportunity to use outside offices if you are maxed out here?
No, what we would do is if we don't have the coverage, we can request other officers from other towns.
Right, because
So, yes.
that opportunity. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it could be very difficult for them to relocate it on a weekend, because there's probably a town in another place that has graduation
Right.
too, so
Right.
to avoid them all, so there is an accommodation available if they can't move off of that date.
Well, just so we had this discussion, the issue is that it's a long period of time for graduation for officers, and being able to staff that is the more difficult.
Yeah.
And paying that overtime is way more expensive than paying.
There's a difference in pay, so for both events, significant and different.
Fortunately, they're separated in distance too, which is good,
Mhm.
so.
Okay. All right, the first item that I skipped over was the charity bike ride, raising funds for ALS research, June 25th at 8:30 to noon. This was continued from our last meeting. And I don't recall what the questions were.
I had the first question was, is there any permitting or anything that we don't have input on based on that it goes on Route 113 being a
Oh,
state
that's
highway?
right. Yeah.
And I don't wanna sit there and prove it and have them think that they
They're
have
not-
approval for that if it's not within our purview. Was that?
So there's a change to the map,
And is that in the?
that is in the packet.
Okay. And to address that concern?
See, I couldn't tell if that change map was for the ALS or
So,
because it was right in between the two packets.
yeah, so the newer one is just below. I sectioned off just the two towns around us, so it goes Merrimack, Haverhill, West Newbury, Newburyport, West Newbury, that listing. And
Yeah.
the map right below it with the thick red line that goes Merrimack to River Road to Main Street to, I believe it's Chase Middle and then down.
That
That
is the ALS. That's not
that is
the
the
other.
new route that was
So-
sent to us recently.
Yeah, so I think there's an error on the written directions.
Yeah, there
It
is.
said
Oh, yeah.
turns right on Main Street,
Mhm.
it should be turn
I
left.
realized it was the wrong way. Yep.
Okay, all right.
Should be
the
left.
map-
You're correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chris, did you have other concerns from last time?
Yeah, in I gotta find it. I think it said, not applicable as far as police details, but yet the chief letter said one, so. One clarification on that.
Yeah, I reviewed the original route, and it looked as though, because we weren't gonna be closed, no roads were gonna be closed as a result of this. That we believe that Main Street is gonna be the biggest impacted location, so that's one location where we need a detail officer.
And just so the applicant is aware of that, because within his request, it says not applicable, so I'm just making sure he's fully aware.
Mhm.
And Chief, are there any other restrictions above and beyond this board and yourself for on the state highway?
No, it's up to the event organizer to follow the rules of the road. We're not closing anything down. They're not requesting to close any roads down, so that's where DOT would
Okay,
take exception, and I think we would locally as well,
Okay.
if there were gonna be widespread impacts for the community.
okay.
I would like to get an up-to-date map that just shows the western portion of the race.
I believe I sent it to you, Chief.
Okay.
I think I sent it.
So that, Jim, you said that's on page 13?
Yes.
That's
Okay.
Okay. And I think we talked last time about the signs. Right?
We weren't present last time for
Oh,
signage.
you are. Okay, so you heard the conversation at the last meeting, if you could put signs at,
Yeah, so
intersection.
yeah, absolutely. And normally the week prior to the event, we'll arrow the entire route so people see it ahead of time, but we definitely can make a note to make sure that there's a sign just at, do you want major intersections?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Just the date and the times, that would be great.
Absolutely. We'll make a note
When
of
you
that.
say that you arrow the route, is that with signage, on posts or what method do you use?
Yep, so it's like physical arrows, they're about this big.
Yeah, okay.
And it'll have all of our information on it. So they'll know it's for ALS Therapy Development Institute. It'll have our number. Any concerns that they may have, they can contact us.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions? Do you have anything else? Mike?
No.
Okay. Great. Motion? for that?
Sure, I'll move that we approve the charity bike ride for ALS research on June 25th. That's
Do
it.
we have everything, right? Jim?
We have the insurance.
I'll second. Yeah, we had the insurance last week.
Yeah.
Angus said it was up to.
Yeah. All right, further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I got that, Jim, thanks. Good.
All right, the next item is a preparation for celebration of life for Dot Kavanaugh.
And so, Christine had sent out a couple of potential dates. Looking at either Thursday, June 22nd or Tuesday, June 27th for a celebration of life. And both the annex and the Sage Center are available both dates. The suggestion is to hold something at 4:30 in the afternoon. That would allow employees to attend at the end of the workday and would also be sufficiently ahead of any evening meetings, so we will need to schedule around those. So
What were the dates again, please? Angus?
either the 22nd or the 27th of June, that's either a Tuesday or a Thursday or a Tuesday.
So are they looking for input from us as to the date or just to be determined?
I think it's all TBD. I just wanted to keep you apprised just as the details. So that's, yeah, once I have something more concrete, I'll let you know, but.
Okay. All right, next item, acknowledgement of receipt of a short-term rental application. Overview of the bylaw.
All right, so we've received very few of these applications under these bylaws in the last many years, actually, since the bylaws adopted in 2016. I think there maybe have been 2 applications that I can think of. So I wanted to, rather than putting something right on for the board to consider the application, I wanted to just share the bylaw because it's not something you've worked with much. And just make you aware an application has been received, and then you could set a date, or you could either do that tonight, or I could share set a date in a future meeting where you'd actually be considering the application, and obviously with notice to the applicant. But for tonight, I just wanted to make you aware it was received. This is the bylaw, and
I'm not familiar with the history of this bylaw.
Can I ask a question on first, because I'm not confused, but is this the only one? Because I remember there was a problem down on the river for the house
yeah.
and a regulation got written. Is this
Yes,
I can't believe it was that many years ago.
yeah,
It seemed like 3 years, so that is the regulation, okay.
yeah,
That was my question too. So,
Yeah, there was
yeah.
too many, there was multiple Airbnb users visiting one location and creating problems, so the select board came up with this, okay. Can't believe it was that long ago.
So was this modeled after another town? I mean,
I doubt it.
okay, so you weren't involved in this?
No, this was prior to my time.
Do you feel this is adequate?
I have concerns about the bylaw.
Okay.
It lacks a clear process. It lacks its clarity as to whether it's a public hearing or a public meeting.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have clear, procedures or appeal procedures. It doesn't give, in my opinion, objective criteria on which to base either an approval or denial. So one of the applications that we had filed, I think 2 summers ago, the applicant ended up withdrawing, partly out of concerns of some of the concerns about vagueness of the bylaw, and some issues with the abutters, and I think they thought they were gonna run into a hard time, so they ended up withdrawing. That's the only other application besides the Marino Drive one that I'm aware of, and that was well underway when I began here.
Okay.
And it's, yeah, so it's something I think the bylaw could benefit from a fresh look.
Yeah. So given that we've received an application under this bylaw though, would we have to consider that with the
Yeah.
existing
Yes.
bylaw?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
right.
Just a couple of 2 questions on it.
Sure.
One is to Angus's point about it being very open-ended, I guess. It's got the section complaints and enforcement. Complaints of what? It doesn't even define
Mhm.
what you can complain about, you know, so that's very open-ended, so that needs some definition. And the other one was just in a tangential way about the applicant. It talks about guests allowed in owner-occupied residential premises. I've got a concern on that because this isn't an outbuilding on the property, it's not the same owner occupied residential premise, so that becomes odd also. It would imply that you couldn't have this permit unless the utilization was in that same building, so outbuildings would not comply potentially. I don't think that's the intent, but that's how it reads.
Mhm.
Have we changed, has the zoning bylaw been changed such that the accessory dwelling unit does not have to be physically connected to the primary dwelling? There was a funny
It used to
twist.
have to be that way, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't recall if that was changed or not. There's a funny twist, and there's at least one house in town where there's this roof appendage that has no function other than to be a physical connection
Mhm.
between 2 structures, 2 really independent structures. But I'm just curious here, because it sounds like this is a, fully independent structure, and.
It is.
Okay, and so does that comply with the current zoning bylaw?
Well, I mean, they're working on an accessory dwelling unit bylaw now, so.
Yeah,
Yeah. I don't know.
and I think that's great, I'm supportive of that, I'm just
Yeah. so
want
we
to make
want
sure
be
that it,
consistent.
yeah, well, if they're working on a bylaw that would allow this in the future, but if it doesn't meet the current bylaw,
Mhm.
then it doesn't meet the bylaw.
Yeah.
So I don't recall where the bylaw is. I know there was discussion about, there's been discussion over the years about that physical connection, the need for that physical connection.
Mhm.
So,
I always felt kind of silly.
yeah, I don't disagree, but
Again, this I like, I mean, obviously people are doing Airbnbs and they can be a positive thing, so I just hope we get it right.
So how would we get it right? So something you want to take the lead on, working on, Chris?
Well, you got zoning first of all, and the bylaws gotta get cleaned up also, but then we've also got an applicant here too, so there's
Right.
multiple issues to look into.
So if we just focus on the bylaw for now, is that a project you want to take on?
Um,
You
No,
can say no.
Well, I just said no.
Okay.
Because I think the focus has to be on the applicant first, because, you know.
Well, we're not discussing the applicant tonight. I mean, we have to give the applicant
They
notice.
apply for it.
Right.
Right, but.
So this is just a general kind of,
I mean,
shot across the
I
bow.
can talk to the building inspector in terms of whether he has
Yeah.
the bandwidth. I think he probably does.
Okay.
You know, he's led some pretty significant initiatives for us over the last 2 years. But I'm not aware of anything he's doing right now that's kind of a.
I think that's a better focus, somebody with the knowledge on it, and I would think he would go to other communities to research theirs as well.
Yeah, I can tell you when the thing came up a couple of summers ago, you know, there was a fair amount of correspondence that I was part of, as well as the building inspector, the former town planner, town council at the time. So I can kind of curate that into some, in terms of potential future amendments to the bylaw, because we did articulate some of the concerns we had. It just, you know, it didn't lead to an amended bylaw, because it's on the list, but it didn't really rise to a level, particularly when the application was withdrawn. But there are somewhere in my archives, there's definitely some critiques of this one as written, which preceded everyone, basically everyone currently on
Can I
staff.
ask a procedural question on this?
Mhm.
We're talking about rewriting the bylaw, but yet we've got an applicant in.
That was my
We
question.
will review him under
Yes.
this bylaw, not what other,
That's correct.
okay.
Yeah.
It'd be- it wouldn't be fair otherwise.
Right.
Right. So is that something that you think we could have for, the next town meeting, for fall town meeting, to have a bylaw to look at?
I think it depends on whether there's a staff person who can really take the lead on it,
Mhm.
and really run with it, and whether there's a clear intent of what we're trying to allow.
Okay.
And is this a zoning bylaw or a town bylaw?
I think
This is
it's
a town
town.
bylaw, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is
So-
it appropriate to involve the planning board in this, or?
We can make them aware, the way it's written, they really don't have
Yeah.
jurisdiction over it.
Mhm.
Well, I think their input would be helpful, particularly if they're looking
In
at
terms of
accessories
amending the
already.
bylaw, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
So this is something that could be done at a staff level, then, it sounds like?
I think if
With
there's
some-
some clear policy
Yeah.
direction,
Yeah.
if we can say where we're trying to get to. So I can talk to Sam about that.
So, I mean, do either of you have any thoughts about what you'd like to see this bylaw do?
I have an overall thought,
Yeah,
and it's not specific. I would like this to be a favorable thing to encourage people to do it in town. I know based on past experience, this was almost put in place to hold things in check.
mhm,
This is the wave of the future. I've got a daughter who lives in DC, and she's got one in her house as an accessory, and it's a good thing, and it's a different dynamic that we didn't grow up with, but it's the wave of the future. So I think however it gets written, it should be done to encourage it, but also to control it too. I mean, you know, limits on number of people, durations and things and such like that, but it can be done in a positive way, not as a restrictive way is all I want
mhm.
to really look at it.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, or would be interesting to see how other communities have handled it. I'm sure there are hundreds, if not thousands of
Yeah.
bylaws
Yeah.
around the country. You know, we want to avoid the pitfalls.
What do you see as the pitfalls?
I think, conflict with neighboring users of property. I think that, to me, that strikes me as
The big one.
the biggest one.
Yeah,
Those controls can be put in place, and one of the simplest ways to do that is to have the property owner lives on premise. It can't be a corporate entity, but
Yeah.
purchasing and Airbnb out, you know,
Yeah.
different rooms in the same.
Yeah.
That can be controlled reasonably. And I think that's sort of how the other property in town, we keep talking, I don't know the address, I wouldn't say it anyways. But I think that's how that got out of control, even though they don't actually live there.
Yeah.
There was just too much of it at one place.
So this,
There can be limits put on to
yeah,
make this work for everybody, I think.
mhm,
so it currently says, and I know we're not gonna write a bylaw now, but you know, I mean, it currently, I think, refers to homeowner occupied primary unit. So what if somebody has an Airbnb and then they decide to travel for a year and rent their primary unit?
or even for a month, right?
Right,
While somebody's- yeah.
right, while somebody's using the Airbnb,
Yeah.
You know, again, we're not gonna.
It's all part of the
we're not gonna-
discussion, yeah.
Yeah, we're not gonna rewrite that now.
Yeah. I found it interesting that the fee is only $10. So I think that needs to be revised. I mean, because there's a fair amount of monitoring and, you
Right,
know, application and all of that, we need to cover those costs.
Back work.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, and since this time, there was a new legislation adopted at the state level to regulate Airbnbs and to provide for basically tracking and monitoring and I remember McCarran had spent some time looking at that new law as relates to this, but it didn't, I don't recall it went very.
So do you think that new law might be actually more strict than our existing law or more definitive than our existing bylaw?
I wouldn't guess.
And do you know if, would the state, I mean, this wouldn't supersede the state bylaw, the state bylaw or the state rule would probably supersede our local bylaw, wouldn't it?
I wouldn't guess.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, if ours was more strict, it would prevail, right? I mean, that's usually how it works. If the local is more strict than the
I
state.
don't recall, but I don't think that the state law applies unless you adopt it. It's that kind of
Oh,
thing.
okay,
So I don't
okay.
think it's something that would supersede this, but I'll get more information about that.
Yeah, I wonder, yeah, we might find that's, you know, possibly that'll be the easiest solution is to adopt a state bylaw, if in fact it's well thought out and seems relevant.
So Angus, you said in terms of this particular application or the current application, it's not clear if there's a public hearing. I mean, how do you think we should proceed with just let them know when it's gonna be discussed?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is some of what I hope we could talk about tonight in terms of, you know, what kind of notification would be provided, whether that's on an agenda or a legal notice or a mail butter notice. I don't know.
If that's not stipulated in this bylaw, can we, it seems like we wouldn't be able to ask that of the applicant.
We as a town could do it.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Okay,
you do it, you're gonna own the cost, which is
Yeah.
minimal.
I do think on a butter notification
Oh, I
would
think
be,
that's,
yeah.
definitely should be a requirement.
Well, that would be the requirement in the future.
Right,
But I think it should be even for this. If you don't, you better notify the abutters. How would you like it if all of a sudden your neighbor's renting?
Who pays for the cost of the abutters notice?
Yeah.
Oh, in the future, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
and so what rate, like, how do you determine which abutters, like within 100 feet, like the
As you
Concom?
know,
That's-
it's depending on what type of
What
permit.
for, yeah.
Yeah,
It could be circular, it could be down the street, it could be.
I would think direct to butters, but, as you know, with planning board special permits, it's a butters to a butters within 300 feet.
Right, which actually to me makes more, personally, I think that makes sense, that, because, you know, if there's a noise generator and you're 2 houses away and it's the RC zone, you know, effectively half acre zoning, you're very much within earshot. But that's just my take on it, first thought.
One of the flaws that I see in this bylaws, you know, over the years, especially back when I was in more land use and permitting things, there was often a rule of thumb that the people getting a butters notification should at least initially have a presumption of standing within the hearing. Because otherwise, you know, why are you sending someone legal notice if they don't actually have standing? And here where there's no clear provision for appeal, on what basis someone might appeal, either the applicant appeal a denial or could appeal an approval, it doesn't set out any of that. So that question isn't as clear as it often would be where you have a zoning or a Concom or a subdivision where there's defined standards for standing. That is more of a logical thing.
Yeah,
Is there any significant cost to notifying more abutters other than the mailings?
Not significant. It's
Out of
not-
respect, I would notify more than less and get them in the loop and hopefully they'll embrace the project.
so we wouldn't require a legal notice or anything. I mean, now, currently under this.
Again, if we
We could,
we
but that, I
pay
mean,
the
that's a more
cost.
significant expense, so
That is a more
Yeah.
significant expense,
Yeah.
that may not be as effective as
I agree.
literally
Yeah.
paying neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be the most effective for sure.
Okay, any other things that you want to try to resolve tonight, Angus, before we like schedule on?
No,
Okay,
Once somebody applies for this, what's the duration, any reapplication, recon?
yeah, well, that's one of the critiques that came up, a year and a half ago, or almost 2 years ago, is this, the way that it's written is that, basically needs to be renewed every calendar year. And with an expiration of December 31st, so I remember when one came in, I think it was like August, and, the applicant was concerned that, this use would require a certain amount of investment in the property. And so they wondered, well, why would we make that investment if the license could just be revoked in 3 months, which was a reasonable question. So I think it's a flaw in the bylaw, but the way it's written, it would need to be.
Well, it may not be, it might be worth renewing it annually in case there are issues that you can't address within the year, that you just terminate the permit, that's easier.
Well, it's easy for the town, but to your point about whether you want to encourage these things, that's not written in a way that would encourage it.
Well, but there's gotta be a process if you've got somebody violate, I mean, if you've got parties in there the whole time and your neighbors are going and complaining all the time, then you would not want to renew it.
Right.
So, the other thing is you want, when the building inspector gets it, make sure it doesn't travel with the property when it gets sold, it should be with the applicant and all that.
right. We probably do need to update the application. I don't know if you noticed, it said by singing this application.
It
Didn't see that. I was wondering, I mean, I thought it was sort of like a talent show too. It was-
We have Dennis out here to sing it, I'm not gonna say.
All right, so when do we want to review this? I mean, the application was made in April 17th. Should we
I would
put
say
it
at
on
our
our next
meeting,
agenda?
Yeah, I mean, he's been out a while,
That-
you know?
I mean, I got a MassWorks grant too, like
Okay, so
really, if we can push it out to late, I mean, I don't know how I'm gonna do, but I'm already committed to different things.
So-
You give us a date then.
I think the 27th, that's
Okay.
more breathing room, and, I think he'll be fine. When he hand delivered it, we spoke when he dropped it off, and, he said he knew it would take a little while, and he said it wasn't like hugely urgent, so.
Okay,
Hopefully June 27th is gonna work. Is it the 27th? I keep saying that, it's whatever that last Monday.
26,
26th, okay.
okay,
also only $10.
that needs to change.
So, I'll pencil that in, we'll let Dennis know.
So it would be.
That was a typo, by the way, it was supposed to be 100.
And so if we are going to, do a butter mailing, that needs to happen 2 weeks ahead of the,
14 days. According to the bylaw.
so that's something that your office would take care of, Jen? I mean, it needs to be before the,
Actually, it doesn't have to be, this is informal, there's no requirement to give the notice.
but if we're gonna do it, for it to be effective, they have to get it before the meeting.
Oh, yeah, before the meeting.
Yeah, that's what I
It doesn't have to be 2 weeks, but whatever the time frame.
But let's aim for that, I think that's a good rule of thumb.
Okay,
So prior to the 12th, receiving a butter notice.
Yeah.
So you can.
So, okay, so who are we gonna include as the abutters then?
I think I heard 300 feet.
I was gonna say butters and butters.
Yeah, that's in it, there, okay.
okay,
I can have Christian.
great. Anything else on that?
No.
Okay. Next item, request for authorization to prepare and submit a notice of intent to the Conservation Commission for permitting of proposed installation of Eagle Pond leveler at 33 Main Street. So I did receive a letter from a resident today about this, but I'm not sure this is the appropriate forum for that. Is that something that should just be forwarded to the Conservation Commission?
Yeah,
I mean, we're just authorizing to
correct.
submit.
Yeah, I did get a chance to meet with both, Paul Savigny and Michelle, late this afternoon. Michelle's on, this call, and at a staff level, we all feel that filing a notice of intent is the right next step.
Mhm.
What elevation the water should be at is a regulatory question that the commission would decide.
Mhm.
You know, we feel that the, you know, proposal to engage, you know, the beaver expert is the way to resolve the concerns, or at least some of the concerns that are town concerns. There are, as I understand it, you know, the residents got concerns to do with beaver impacts on their property. Those are not necessarily public concerns. It only becomes a, you know, public safety issue if there's an impact on public infrastructure. So, you know, we do feel that filing the notice of intent is the right next step. You know, we can keep you know, send the board a copy of the notice of intent once that's prepared.
Mhm.
And there's nothing that, you know, presupposes a certain outcome. But some of the concerns that were raised in the abutters letter are to do with actions taken by Mass DOT when they did some work adjacent to the catch basin, not done by the town.
Okay, so I will just forward that letter to Michelle.
Yeah, Michelle, I sent it to Michelle.
Oh, you did? Okay.
So, Michelle, I think I've kind of butchered things because I'm not as hands-on with this issue. Did you want to supplement anything I've said?
No, I think you have it pretty much all right. This would just be to authorize you to sign the notice of intent. And then, like you said, all of the decisions regarding the height of the pond, what it would be set to, would be made during that notice of intent hearing process with the Conservation Commission.
Any questions?
I will say in meeting with both Michelle and the health agent this afternoon, I was very impressed by the health agent's records. He had you know, property map from 1972 showing the high water line at that time, and he had overlaid that with more recent mapping. And he's got a really strong kind of understanding of all of the ins and outs on this particular location.
There's a lot of history on this particular.
Yeah, going back, you know, 20 years. So that was very valuable to have his kind of knowledge of that context, none of which I would know anything about.
Mhm.
Track the beavers.
Chris, did you have a
It's
question?
a sort of obtuse question, but what happens, I watched the video on these things to understand what they were and how they work. And what they do is basically force the beaver to move. So he's gonna go somewhere. Where is he gonna go then? Is he gonna impact, is this what the abutters are concerned about?
It's an Airbnb. It's
Not approved yet. No, I mean, would it not be better to trap and rehome them somewhere in an appropriate, I just don't know, it's just a funny thought. It's like, okay, you've solved one problem, but do you create others?
Michelle, wasn't trapping tried in the past?
Yeah, so Paul really handles the trapping side of things, but it's a difficult site to trap at because of the location. And with beavers, you can't relocate them, they're territorial. So when a beaver is trapped, it has to be humanely dispatched. That is the ultimate solution. And so the hope with a lot of the pond levelers is that the beavers will live there. They will still make dams. They will live out their lives. The dams just won't be effective in the fact that they won't block the water. So you build the cage around the pond leveler device at enough distance where the dam's ineffective. And so you solve the issues of like flooding and roadway undermining and things like that. Even without a pond leveler device, the beavers do move around. The young, after I think a year or so, they go off on their own, especially the males, to find their own territory. So the beavers are always going to be moving around and causing, you know, beaver issues, or building habitat, however you want to look at it, but they are pretty mobile.
Okay, thank you.
Want to make a motion to give?
Yeah, make a motion to give Angus the authorization to prepare and submit a NOI to the Conservation Commission for permitting of proposed installation of a beaver pond leveler at 33 Main Street.
Second.
All right, any further discussion?
I would just note that, you know, so when we go forward with this, once I have something, I'll copy you and everything, so
Great.
you'll be aware when it's gonna go to Concom.
Okay.
I expect Paul's gonna be pretty hands-on. He's been very helpful to this point.
Great. All right, all in favor? Aye. Thanks, Michelle.
Are you here for a particular issue? Oh, great, okay.
Mike, I was thinking though, are you here for the bicycle
I saw that and I was gonna stick around.
Okay, anybody object to moving that up unless you have nothing else to do tonight? Okay, so we'll move to item J, potential to authorize MOA with the Commonwealth to receive safe passage for bicyclists signs. That is item J, page 55, thanks, Jim.
My only question is, what's the downside? It seems pretty
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
positive.
Well, we have to install them
Okay,
and we're currently shorthanded.
We have 3 months to
well,
install.
the installation's,
3 months once we get the signs.
Right,
but
right.
it's gotta be on a 2x2 post. It can't be like some of the signs they just did for wildlife was zipped to a telephone pole.
Yeah.
That's easy. So
Yeah, these are 2 by 2 or 2 1/4 by 2 1/4 square steel
I mean,
posts.
it's gotta get planted in the ground. It's a little more work, but still. I know from Rick's perspective, and I don't even ride a bike anymore on the roads if I can help it, because it's so bad.
Yeah,
So I think this is, anyway, I'll tell you what the chief says.
I agree. I think it's gonna be helpful to have, we have major routes as we've talked about
Right.
previously, throughout the town, so I think it's important.
do you have a potential list of locations? That's one thing we have to submit.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bachelor Street, I mean, Rick, you would probably speak better to this, but I think
Maple
Bachelor Street,
Yeah, I mean, there,
Main Street.
yeah, probably River Road. I mean, there are a number, I think the, sort of arterial streets are the only ones we have to think about.
Yeah.
So, Middle Street, I don't think Main Street we would be doing, I think it's a state highway. But I bet MassDOT has something in mind there already, I'm guessing.
Indian Hill.
Something up their sleeve. What was that? Indian
Indian
Hill,
Hill.
yeah, Indian Hill, Molten. Ash. Yeah,
I'm gonna say Maple, I think that's the worst street in town for cars. I mean, they don't give you any room. There's not a lot of room, first of all.
yeah, yeah, so it could be Maple and then Georgetown Road as well.
I avoid Maple when I can when I'm out walking, it's so bad.
So would the idea to be put one at each end, or I guess you have to kind of figure out.
Have to think about that, and then there are 2 different sizes, so there are streets where you might want a smaller sign, and there are streets where you might want a larger sign.
Mhm.
I have been, working with Butch, the highway foreman, provided him all of this, and he's looking at providing a list of locations. I think, his recommendation would be that smaller signs would be appropriate for West Newbury.
Mhm.
And he has costed out the, cost of the post for, 2 1/4 by 10 foot. It's about $132 per post, obviously not including installation. The good thing about the MOU is, once you get it, you have 90 days. If you don't get all of them installed in 90 days, you have to return the signs, but it's not like there's a financial penalty. So I think if we go forward, what we would, probably want to do is not get the signs until we're closer to ready to having the manpower and, to actually install them. But there, I think there's support at the staff level to go forward with this, but we'll need to scramble to get a list put together by June 1st. I wish they would give us more time to work on these things.
Yeah.
So good.
So, where would the money for those materials come from?
It depends if, I assume it would come out of, it would be next year's operating budget.
Mhm.
And then, depending on the total price tag, hopefully it's something that could be absorbed in the operating
Yeah.
budget. We do carry, as you know, we carry a expense line for signs.
Mhm.
So it depends how many we do and what the, total cost is.
Okay.
Was there a anticipated delivery? I don't recall seeing that.
I don't recall seeing that. I know that the lifespan of the MOU went into 2025. August 31st, 2025.
If we respond by June 1st, I guess it's unrealistic to expect that there would be any signs delivered before the end of the fiscal year.
Yes. I would think so.
Yeah.
I would think so.
Any other input?
No, I'd be happy to sit down with Rick and Butch and
Okay.
come up with a list possibly next week if your schedule works with that, and we can present it to Angus and move forward with getting the order.
Sure.
That's the question.
Sure.
So once you put these signs up, is there any enforcement attached to it? Because you're telling them you give 4 feet. What happens when you observe somebody,
Yeah, we have enforcement with bicycle.
do they get written up or they just get talked to real strongly?
It all depends.
It's pretty new law. Which-
Yeah, I
which is
did-
great.
I'm just curious where it goes from here. The
It's
signs
great.
are great, but what's the key?
I mean, really just the awareness of what's important.
Yeah.
Because
Me too.
ultimately, we don't want somebody to get hit by a vehicle.
Right.
That's really the spirit of it.
So it was called the vulnerable road users law, right? And it applies, I mean, the law applies not just to bicyclists, but to pedestrians as well.
Goes into effect next January. 2024.
An act to reduce fatalities. With the manager. Okay. Anything else on this?
No, I think it's great.
So we need a motion to enter into the MOA, I guess, is that right? Or
To
to authorize you to
authorize
send?
submittal of the MOA to the state with a list of locations to be determined by the highway foreman with the chief of police and with the board.
Okay.
So moved.
So, yeah, so moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second,
All right, any further discussion?
Aye.
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 All right, great.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
All right, so let's go
Okay.
back to item F. Which is a follow-up discussion from select board attendance at the Board of Water Commissioners meeting. So this was a follow-up to the instructions that were issued at town meeting to the Board of Water Commissioners. Select board wants to collaborate with the water commissioners instead of just giving them instructions. So we discussed both forming a committee to negotiate with the city of Newburyport for a memorandum of agreement and also to work on the financial plan. That was the second part of the instructions. So, in the first piece of that, we need to, assign one select board member to be part of this negotiating team. And, Rick, you've expressed interest in that. Do we need
I
to
thought
vote?
we sort of done that at the meeting the other
Well, we
night,
did
so-
do it in a public
Yeah, I guess,
meeting.
well, that actually was a public meeting.
Oh, true, it wasn't
Yeah,
executive
yeah.
session. So we don't need to vote on that then, Angus, right? Or do we?
Was that right?
Right,
Oh,
right.
If we,
Yeah,
they're reminding me that we
Right.
already made this decision.
yeah,
so.
okay.
I guess we maybe didn't vote on it then. I think we really, so,
You wanna vote on it? Hold on, maybe Rick can be the select board rep to that committee.
All right, I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I guess. I
Okay.
abstain. I either aye or I abstain.
So on the second piece of it, the financial plan. Chris, have you spoken with the finance committee members, or Angus, do we know what the next step is in that, or where's?
Well, I thought we had some good initial discussion at the meeting last Monday.
Yeah.
The idea of coming up with like an outline or table of contents of different things. I think that's probably a good starting point. So I don't know who's gonna take the first step, whether that's my office or the FinCom or this board, or the water commission. But I think that if we can get something in the circulation, I have some thoughts in my head on things that ought to be included, and we all do too, so.
Mhm.
But I think getting this working group established is a good first step. But Chris, I think I heard FinCom is meeting, what,
Checking the date.
June 9th?
June 7th.
June 7th, okay.
I'm going to that meeting to wrap up old business that I've been involved with and a list of working tasks that we were gonna get to that I'm presenting to them, so.
Do you know what time on the 7th?
I have it listed as 6 o'clock starting.
Okay.
So could that be an agenda? item
Yeah, I
to
think that's a
discuss?
great thing, and that way, that gives us, once the Mass Works knock on wood goes in on June 2nd, that'll, I could definitely dash something off pretty quickly, but.
So that the that discussion was about basically a table of contents for what the plan would have with the identifying the attachments and, or exhibits.
Yeah, that was my thought. I mean,
Yeah, that seemed to, everybody seemed to be in
it's
agreement
kind
about
of
that.
a small step to start, but I think it's an important one.
I think you also ought to have as part of that agenda, the makeup of the committee, and who the people are, so they'll know that Rick and whoever's on the FinCom and you know, I believe Bob James, is he?
Mhm.
No, he's on the other.
So this, for the financial plan, I think that's just.
Yeah, that's a different.
Dennis's office, but I know that some FinCom members have expressed interest
Okay,
in.
so you want to find out how who's on the committee, how it's been established. That'd be helpful, right?
Yeah, are you planning to go to that meeting, Angus?
I don't know. If I'm available, I would like to be there, but I
Okay.
don't know yet.
All right,
So this is actually a different topic though than the negotiating committee.
it's the second part of the instructions, which
Okay,
we did talk about.
okay, good, yeah, because I'm actually not available on the 7th, so, but I don't think I need to be at this
No.
particular one, so, yeah.
I mean, I might sit in if I can do so without deliberating with you, if you're going.
Talk to you, just put a little divide.
Okay. All
It's a
right,
public meeting anyway, so.
well, so, but I do think it would be good to get this off the ground, so,
Definitely.
yeah, okay. So in terms of the negotiating team for item A, any further discussion on that? Did you want to say anything about that?
No,
Okay. Anything else on that, Angus, that we should discuss?
I did speak with, special counsel last week. And, you know, kept her apprised of the direction we're going and, seemed like the next step, once the negotiating, team is kind of ready, would be to send a letter to the city, basically just reiterating some things that have been said verbally, but to put it in writing, that it's, or will be our intent and our, interest to engage in discussions to pursue a new municipal agreement. And I think in light of the, priority that's given to the pipeline project in the city's capital program documents, to, you know, caution against the city going any further with design without really
without,
engaging the town of West Newbury. So, Avery thought that was definitely the right next step, and, I told her I thought almost certainly coming out of tonight's meeting, there would be an interest in seeing a letter like that sent.
Mhm.
So she was out, we talked on Thursday, she said she was gonna be out straight through today, but that she would have some time to get tomorrow to start working on such a letter.
Mhm.
Just a simple, you know, one page.
Yeah.
And so I told her it would be, you know, I talked with the board about whether you would envision a letter like that coming from the board, with copy to special counsel as opposed to coming from the attorney. I think that would be a better way to start.
Yeah,
So I
you think which would be the better?
to have a letter come from the select board,
Okay,
or the chair or whomever, but I think if coming out of tonight, if, I would suggest if the board would, you know, essentially, you know, authorize the chair to work with outside counsel to finalize a correspondence, and that way we don't need to wait for another meeting. You know, if something like that comes together in the next, you know, week or 10 days to allow you to move forward, it's not something.
and would that come just from the select board, or would it come from the Board of Water Commissioners and select board?
Ideally, it could be signed by both.
I mean, I would like to circulate it, you know,
Yeah.
by them, and, if that works out for the timing of it.
yeah,
Okay,
We need to vote to nominate to have Wendy be the rep to work with council.
I don't know.
As the chair, she could negotiate on behalf of the board.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the letter's gonna say anything that's not already been articulated by
Yeah,
this
it's
board,
just-
it's not setting up
raising
new
the
ground,
issue.
it's just.
All right, so I'll work with you on that.
Great, yeah, I told Avery I'd let her know how things went.
Can I jump backwards for a second? You
Sure.
talked about the FinCom meeting and put those on the agenda. Are you gonna communicate that with them, or do we, or?
I can write something up.
Yeah,
if,
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Next item, request for authorization to pursue land grant designation of town manager as project manager. So this is for the, Sawmill Brook property, correct? And, Essex County Greenbelt is taking the lead on this, but does need some assistance from us. So my question is, it seems like a lot of the conservation agent's time would be needed for this. Is that your assessment?
Yeah.
Is that doable between now and the end of?
Yes, July 13th, July 13th. So there's but the goal is to get a application that's largely complete by, probably June 20th. Because the Concom would want to review it before it's submitted, and this board would also be given a copy at that time. So it wouldn't go in until both the Concom and the select board were comfortable with it. And yeah, we think that's realistic. There were a couple of questions that came up. We had a meeting last week with Vanessa, Michelle and I did, and actually Rebecca was part of that as well. We met for about an hour, talking through some of the questions. And then the next day we had a Zoom meeting with the program administrator at the state, Vanessa Farney, and she was helpful on some of the questions. The main questions were to do with parking accessibility in terms of like ADA compliance, as well as land management, because that's a ingredient of the application is setting out a land management plan for how the property is being managed. So we talked through some of the questions we had. And we think we got some guidance from the state as to what they're going to be looking for. Greenbelt's going to be doing most of the work.
Okay.
So,
I'm just concerned, since the agent is still part-time, whether this is gonna be a lot.
yeah, no, I think it's going to come together nicely. I mean, yeah, definitely Vanessa Johnson Hall is doing most of the work.
Okay,
So this is basically though for authorization to let Angus be the representative.
to submit the.
Right.
Yeah, to be the primary point of contact with
Project
the state
manager,
office. Yeah.
So within that letter, can I just, one modification I would like to see is just to add clarity. At the end, it says pertaining to the grant application. I would like to say comma for the Sawmill Brook Conservation Project, because it doesn't mention it whatsoever within the letter. But just to be specific to this project.
All projects.
Forever, I got this letter from the select board.
You caught me. I'll try again.
So this is a requirement of the grant application?
It is.
Obviously?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll make a motion.
Yeah, and you know, Michelle had definitely offered to be project manager, but I felt that given, you know, this board's interest in the property, it would ensure, yeah, I thought it would be better.
I mean, most of the things Greenbelt is taking, but the last item the town is doing is a lot of work, a lot of documentation, good land stewardship on past grants. Activities from the following list, so. But that's great if she is able to support your project management for this.
Yes, yeah. Yes,
Okay,
we got it.
all right, do we have a second on that?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay. I think the motion was with that one change, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, the next item is request for authorization to pursue the MassWorks grant for the Middle Street Bridge, as well as an update on costs and funding sources.
Okay, so I included in your packet the extension request that we had submitted, I think it was just last Monday with that one out. And I think that extension request really lays out a pretty good overview of where we stand right now in terms of both permitting and financing. As you see in the email thread, we won't have a answer as to whether we get the extension or not by June 2nd. June 2nd is the deadline to submit a new MassWorks application. So going back a couple of months, Wayne and I had you know, there's been a meeting with the program administrators, I want to say probably in March. And we agreed at that time, it made sense to go on two fronts, to seek the extension, but also to submit a new application, in the event that we don't get the extension. So this is before you tonight primarily to request authorization to seek the grant. Chris, you may or may not know this, you probably have inferred it if you don't know it, but there is a policy of the select board policies that the board has to sign off on the submittal of grant applications, not necessarily the application itself, but has to affirmatively agree, yes, we're gonna seek a grant. So that's why you see these requests coming up. So I had a meeting last week with the town planner and with Kate Bradstreet, DPW, and with Rebecca. We're primarily the working group to do this grant. It is gonna be, we're gonna need to pull a rabbit out of the hat, even though we have the 2019 application in Word, and we can obviously cut and paste a certain amount. A lot has changed since then, and the program application has changed pretty significantly since then. Back then, the MassWorks was a standalone program. Now it's part of the One Stop, so it's all through that same portal. And one thing I found when I logged in last week, we had done this last June with what became the MBTA Communities Grant. It's the same portal, but they don't let you get to section 3 until you complete section 2. They don't let you get to section 4 until you complete section 3. And I think I was on section 2, and I just started putting in placeholder language just so it would let me get to the next page, so I could even know what's ahead of me. It's very frustrating. You can't just download the complete application, focus on the hard things, and go back and fill in the easy things. You actually have to do it sequentially.
Well, at least, you don't have to do it all in one fell swoop.
No, you can save your progress, and we have a login.
Because there's a history there with other.
Right. So, and I set up both Sue Brown and Caitlin Bradstreet as users within the system, so they can both log in and have full access to see what's in there. But it's definitely going to be, it's definitely going to come down to the last minute to get it submitted. We will. I don't have any doubt about that. Some of the things that are the biggest concern on lead time are things like support letters. We applied for MassWorks in 2019. I think we submitted probably 16 or 18 support letters, and as you can imagine, that took some time to coordinate. All of those are how many, 4 years old now.
You just Photoshop things.
So that's something that, I'd like to get, we're juggling a million different things. So, but I'd like to get someone on staff who can kind of like follow up with everyone to submit a letter, say, hey, you want to resubmit this, just so we can submit what appears to be, current support. So there's some of those things that just take time in applications. And I will say that June 2nd deadline kind of snuck up on us. So we're kind of, we'll be scrambling to meet the deadline. In the meantime, I did also want to take the opportunity tonight to just provide an update on the cost and funding sources, from, I think it was the last meeting, we talked about this updated cost estimate, and that even if you make some very rosy assumptions in terms of Newbury Port's funding and in terms of the MassWorks extension, even if that all broke in our favor, there's still a $1.6 million shortfall based on the construction cost estimates. So that's quite daunting. And what I've learned more recently, actually just in the second part of last week, is that while the city's capital program does propose $700,000, that's not real money. That's kind of a placeholder, and it's actually identifies in the capital program for the city the source of that funding being grant funds, which is not actually true. So I don't think I ever expected the city council to appropriate $700,000, but based on what I've learned since I put this in last Monday, I don't know that they're gonna propose any amount. And obviously that would make that shortfall that much greater.
Yeah.
So we do have, we've been looking at other grant potentials going back to really in some extent throughout the project, but especially in the last 6 or 7 months, we have not yet found a grant other than the MassWorks that seems to be right on point with this, or that we think would be competitive for. I'd like to get, more, we don't have a grant writer on staff. So, but I'd like to get more staff more aware of what we're trying to do here, so we can do more of our own independent research on that. Because most of the work that was done to research these other 6 or 7 grant programs we looked into was done by the grant writer at Newbury Selectboard. And so we've had just very limited bandwidth to do our own research on that. So, right now it's definitely daunting. In some ways, I actually would rather not get the extension and to get a new grant, because that would reset the clock.
Mhm.
And the extension, as you saw, the materials provides, for 1 fiscal year, and there really is not a path, realistic or otherwise, to get the bridge, built in fiscal year 24. That's just not in the card. So, if we don't get the extension, it won't break my heart, but it does mean we're gonna put our best foot forward with a new grant. One issue of policy that remains to be seen is whether, if we did get a new MassWorks grant, would we be eligible for the full $1 million, or would the maximum be the net amount of roughly $700,000 that will be remaining by the end of June?
Mhm.
We don't know, and we spoke to Nicholas Violens and Mark Horn back in March or so. The administration was brand new, they didn't have any guidance on that, so they said their advice to us was apply for the whole amount, but don't be surprised if the administrators, if they do award the grant, end up capping it at the net amount, so that you end up with $1 million over the 2 MassWorks grants.
And so what is the deadline for the new application?
June 2nd.
For both is June 2nd?
No, the extension went in last Monday. I
Yeah.
submitted that last Monday.
Yeah, okay.
And then MassWorks is due June 2nd.
And so, I mean, how different is the application from the extension? I mean, is
I
it-
think a lot of the raw material, it's, we can get it done. It's, I will tell you from looking through the couple of pages that I looked through, I was left, and when I met with Sue and Caitlin last week to kind of try to get them up to speed on it, I told them it's like, how many different ways can you say the same thing?
Yeah.
Right, the bridge is closed, we need the bridge, it provide, there's some things I didn't put in here about the emergency evacuation, the Seabrook, that were in the 2019, so, we need to hit our talking points, but how many different ways can you say that?
So are there additional information requirements that?
They ask about some of the, are we a housing choice community, what's it gonna do to expand economic development opportunities, what's it gonna do to create new jobs? Does it benefit any, economic, or environmental justice populations? It's same things that we did with the one-stop grant last year.
Okay.
So I think between the 2019 grant, last summer's one-stop grant, which was successful, both of those were successful. We have a lot of raw material. It's just finding the time to put it all where it needs to go, uploading any documents that need to be provided. So we can do it. It's just, other than the one meeting I had with Sue and Caitlin, and I spent about an hour preparing for that and just getting myself familiar with the portal. The entire work week last week, that was all that happened on this. And this week I've got, an all-day workshop Thursday down in Needham, I'm out Friday. There's not a lot of time,
Yeah.
we have the parade Monday, like, there's just not
Right.
a lot of hours between now and June 2nd, so we will find a way. It will probably be, like a late at a time. And it's difficult because even though I can point to all these memos, for people, Wayne and I we've kind of handled this thing for 4 years. And without him here, there's really not been anyone else on staff who's been really hands-on with the street bridge. So, as I'm telling the support staff, all that, I'm like, I could put the same time into just writing it myself, because it's complicated. And when you get into things like the MOU with the city and what happened, no one was here, no one was involved with that. So we just gotta, get it done. But
And so we should probably point out that our assistant or our projects manager.
It's conflicted.
Yeah.
That's a really important.
Right.
That's a really important point, because this would be a project that the DPW programs projects manager would be leading on as project manager. But for her status as a city council in Newbury,
Yeah.
so she can't have anything to do with it. So that's a really important point, because we do actually have a staffing structure that, you know,
Would take
is
care of
more supportive for these kinds of things, but.
But not in this
kind of
case.
To help us in this case.
Yeah. And you did say that the town planner is able to. help.
Yeah,
And she
yeah,
did
she's
stop
gonna
it.
do everything she can, and, you know, we haven't had a chance to circle back since last, I think we met last Tuesday, and, so we'll meet, you know, probably not until Wednesday, because tomorrow is almost entirely booked with other meetings, so.
Any other questions or comments from you? Two? No.
Yeah, so I think we need a motion though to, for authorization to apply. So I'd move, to, authorize the town manager to, pursue the Mass Works grant, for the Middle Street Bridge.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. All right, the next item is an update regarding use of RAP funds, potential to contract for installation of a new guardrail on the westerly edge of Farm Lane. So this has been a while. I mean,
Oh, I'm sorry, there was one last point, and this was in your packet, but this memo that was on the Newbury Court. This thing here, which would not have jumped off the page if you. But this is their budget schedule,
The date.
when they'll be reviewing the sections of the budget, and I was able to confirm, it's this workshop 8 on June 8th. That's when they'll be reviewing those BPS budget, operating budget, and capital items. So that June 8th,
And what's the time on that?
I want to say it was 6 p.m. Definitely 6 p.m. So that's something we need to have on our calendars, and I think that it would make a lot of sense if we could send something to the city council ahead of that meeting,
Mhm.
and then be there to represent what, but I think definitely submitting something in writing ahead of time that sets out why it's in our collective best interest to work together at this, strike while the iron's hot, take advantage of the, you know, not just the potential Mass Works money, but also the Mass DOT Small Bridge Grant, which they got, you know, in, I think, 2017, and which only has another year on it. They got an extension, so that's good. They have about 250,000. That's only good through June of 2024. So this stands to lose that as well. So I think we want to really, you know, make our best case of why this is a good public interest project that benefits both communities. And as much as it may not be super high on their list,
Mhm.
it's not going to get any cheaper. And the consequence of doing nothing is quite substantial. You know, if the bridge utterly fails and falls into the reservoir, that could become an emergency situation where both communities have to incur costs. So I would definitely want to send something to the council so they receive it at least 2 or 3 days, ideally more, but you know, we'll see what we can help with.
So is that something we would work on, or?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably, you saw the note I sent I've sent a couple of notes to the mayor. I would probably start from those and just paraphrase those. Just to try to make the case of why it's a good project, and it's important, it's not gonna get any easier. And then just show up and make that case to the extent that we're given the opportunity to speak, they've only allocated 2 hours for the entire workshop. For the entire DPS budget and capital program, so I don't want to be too optimistic about how much time. That's why I think getting something in writing is so important, in case we're not getting.
Yeah, so the fact that the Mass Works grant will have just been submitted is probably a good thing.
Mhm.
Just in terms of the argument, the presentation.
Mhm. So are you planning to go?
I actually will not be around, I'll
Okay.
probably out of state.
Okay. So Angus, the letter, something that you're gonna work on?
Yeah, I can work on that.
Yeah, so I don't know if anybody else is able to attend.
I'll be able to attend.
Great, thanks.
So you said they still have money, so are they contributing to the permitting costs, or are we?
They're not, because the small bridge
Oh, they're
grant
not.
was half and half construction and engineering, so they drew down their these 3 years ago, when we started getting the mass works.
Okay.
And, let's see, it looks like I have cable advisory on my calendar that night, so I'll just, I'll cover my agenda.
What night of the week is that?
That's a Thursday.
All right, is that it on that?
That's it, yeah.
All right, so then we'll move on to the farm lane guardrail. So this has been in our capital improvement program for a while, right?
Yeah, just about two cycles, you know.
Yeah. So you're gonna give us an update on where that stands?
Yeah, I think it's an important project, based on some of the, slope coming off Farm Lane. It would definitely be an improvement for public safety to get a guardrail installed there. The real question we've had is whether it's something that needs to be, engineered, or whether it's something that the guardrail installer that's now been, selected through the MVPC bid process, could just be given the parameters and do that. And anything they would do would be, would meet MassDOT specification. So we've done a fair amount of research on this, and got some advice from town council, and it's really, as the roadway commissioners, I'm really gonna follow whatever you guys tell me to do. I will say that, in talking with Christine Wallace, and she spent a fair amount of time with Wayne on this. They had tried to get, the engineering corp, TEC, to do, some engineering on this. I think the purpose of that really was to have something to put out to bid, so there'd be a specification that could be put out to bid. Now that MVPC has gone through its regional procurement process, and there's a, low bid firm selected, I don't think when we talk about engineering, it's not like a full engineering plan with like, survey and all of that. It's more just to give the vendor clear direction on what the design parameters are. So I think it's, it's a judgment call as to whether, this is, whether this is anything other than a run-of-the-mill kind of guardrail project. I went out and walked the site today. I had previously, but it had been a while, so I went out there. Rick happened to be there at the same time, so he and I walked the length of it ourselves, and there was more shoulder than I had recalled in most places. There are a couple of places, especially as you get down toward Main Street, where it's a pretty narrow shoulder. But for the most part, there looks to be at least 4 feet or more off pavement that you would think would be, more than sufficient to install a guardrail application. So Butch has spoken to the vendor. They're not yet under contract. They haven't signed a contract yet. He had been scheduled to meet them on site today, but the person had a funeral that they had to go to, so he had to postpone. So Butch expects to meet him on site tomorrow. And so we left it that I would let him know what comes out tonight, is because we don't yet know if they have the bandwidth to do the work in the next 6 weeks. But with all that said, this is on your agenda under the context of the RAP funding. But I got an update from Caitlin Bradstreet earlier today that we actually have enough RAP work either already done or already moving forward, that whether this project goes or not, we actually are gonna have the RAP funding fully utilized.
Okay.
So that's good news. So that shouldn't be a factor in deciding what to do it.
So how do we pay for this?
Highway, sidewalk, and trees out of the operating budget.
Okay, and there's enough.
Yeah.
So that takes relief off the time frame. So you
It
might
does.
want to have some engineering looked at then potentially.
So could you explain how the MVPC process, I mean, they must have, these vendors must have to have submitted qualifications, and they review, But is there a specification on what type of guardrails are allowed? You know, for example, if this is a more challenging application, or is it just straight guardrails?
Well, so they put in pricing for 3 different types. 2 were comparable, you know, per linear foot, I think $38 and $39 respectively.
Mhm.
There was a 3rd unit price put in at $850. I'm told that that's for just for the end, like, you know, where it curls around. And that's not actually a length of the guardrail, it's more just the end part
Mhm.
is more costly. So I don't know what the difference is between those 2 specifications, the $38 and $39.
So if we're not using RAP funds, I mean, you know, we could do the hiring on our own. I mean, the advantage to this is that somebody has already reviewed the qualifications of these contractors and.
Yeah, we have to go through the whole procurement process
Right.
if we don't use the RAP funds, right?
Right. No,
No?
So we can
Okay.
still-
no, we can still contract. with-
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
with the low bidder,
So that's just
Okay.
a procurement issue, we.
just the procurement, not to do with
You
RAP.
said $38 or $39 a foot
Yeah,
at 1,030 feet? It's only $39,000.
yeah,
That's why we're looking at 100 and a quarter.
we're not.
no, that was an
That-
estimate
Yeah, that
from
was.
2 years ago.
Yeah, that was something Wayne. had
A
put together.
first pass look at it,
Yeah,
you know, I think he
He
was
said
assuming.
$100 a foot, right?
Okay.
The major issue was we were unable to find a vendor that would do such a small amount of.
that's right.
Okay, so I'm looking at that, that makes no sense.
Yeah.
We couldn't find anyone.
Yeah, I think that's what Jim just.
Yeah, no, we discussed the unit pricing.
Relatively small job.
May 5th.
Hopefully that will-
May 5th was when the pricing came in for the MVPC process. So when that was done, Wayne didn't have any of that information.
Purely guessed by Wayne.
Yeah.
All right,
Was there, can I have a couple of questions?
sure.
What was there prior to the school construction? Because it was either a fence or a fence and a guardrail for a certain portion. Did that get removed or not? I just remember that we could not get through. right?
Yeah, actually, I think, Chris, it was a mess of trees and stuff. I don't think there was actually a fence. I may be wrong, but I don't think there was actually a fence there beforehand.
And then as you go further down Farm Lane, I think the problem got increased because they made that huge cut because the school was actually down. I guess my question is, why wasn't this considered when they created a greater hazard?
We did send it to Pentucket a couple of years ago, to see if this is something they would look at as, part of the school's cost, and, they weren't inclined to do that.
Yeah, but my contention, that they created up at Main Street, not much has changed other than they put in the drainage and the thing, but further down, I think most people would be stunned at how low the school sits compared to the previous one. And that created that significant hill in the problem, so. Obviously, it's not going anywhere, but I think the school should have had some responsibility for that, and
Yeah, the school was approached. They were given the opportunity to help address it, and they said, no, thanks. So we don't really have any grounds.
enough said,
Yeah.
that was unfortunate. Okay,
Other questions?
The request was made.
I'm glad it was,
Yeah.
but disappointed that. Glad I wasn't on the board at the time.
Yeah, I mean, if you
So
look, if you look at the slope there, and, you know, if we had a slope bylaw, you wonder if it's,
Yeah, no.
if it wouldn't be it, yeah.
All right, so what do we need here?
Well, I think the question is really, as, you know, the roadway commissioners, whether you are, and I don't know whether you've all had the chance to go out and walk there or not, but whether you're, comfortable if the vendor is able to do the work, and obviously they're gonna view it on site with Butch tomorrow.
Mhm.
And if they're comfortable doing the work, whether it's from, operating budget or whatever, would you like to go ahead with this project, provided we have the money to do it, or not?
Thoughts?
I think it's a good idea. You're eliminating a hazard, even if it's not engineered, you still reduce the hazard significantly so that it won't create an issue. So I think it's a good idea.
And you said there's more shoulder than you thought, so you're more comfortable with it?
I'm much more comfortable
Okay.
with it. I think there's a couple of areas where it's narrow. Rick had a question more, I don't know if it's more, I don't want to describe it as an aesthetic question, or if it's.
Well,
But
it's
I
kind
think
of
it's
a
a great
practical
question,
stuff.
so maybe-
Yeah, so the grading of what's there for a shoulder, the shoulders looks like, I estimated average is about 4 feet wide.
Mhm.
There are a few places where it's less than 4 feet wide as you get, closer towards Main Street, say 3/4 of the way from where the guardrail would start to Main Street. There are a couple of places where, as Angus mentioned, it's a little bit narrower, but, essentially the shoulder isn't, it's not flat, it actually is bermed up in places. It's hard to say exactly what it is because, now that a month ago, it would have been much more obvious, but now everything's growing up and, the poison ivy dissuades you from poking in there to see what's, you don't exactly go digging in to see what's underneath. So it's hard to say exactly what the surface is like, but it seems to me that it ought to just be fairly simple grading done before they put the guardrail in to what our highway department or, public services, public works, thinks is appropriate. But I think it ought to be dealt with. I don't think it's a big job, if you have a piece of equipment. I could be proven wrong, but because I'm not in the business.
What kind of warranty is there with the work? Is that part of the procurement thing of WPC?
Well, that was in terms of warranty, that I don't know. I didn't ask that
I
question.
don't know if that's the right term for a
In
construction.
terms of the construction specification, it's all gotta be MassDOT spec.
Okay.
And that's something that's, required both by the, procurement document that MVPC issued, as well as the advice that we got earlier today, from the RAP program administrator.
Okay.
So any grading that needs to be done that Rick is considering, would the DPW be able to accommodate that is the first question. And then are there any obstructions, phone poles or anything else potentially in the way?
There are poles in places and.
I just don't know the impact relative to where the fencing would be.
Yeah, and I saw something in there about, I think I saw something in the specification about that, the guardrail's gotta be a minimum of 48 inches from an immovable object, meaning like a telephone pole.
Okay.
So that, and I think I read that after you and I were out there
Okay.
this afternoon. And that got me thinking, like, are there parts where they'd have to put a gap in the guardrail because of it?
Well, I assume that, I was kind of assuming that they would do that, but, as I pointed out, there's at least one footpath. If it was a hiking destination, you'd call it a herd path. I mean, it's because it's not an official route up the hill, but there's at least one place where, where students, probably on their way home to the neighborhood, over towards, the Chestnut Street, that area. As I was walking back, one of the students was marching up the hill, came out right in front of me. It was kind of caught me off guard. But I had been wondering about that, do people actually use this? So that answered that question. So if you look at the count of those end fixtures, I think there were either 8 or 10 of them, in the proposal. I gotta go back and find that, but there wasn't just one at either end.
Yeah.
And I assume that that's to accommodate the, utility poles and stuff like that. And, seems to me that if there is in fact a herd path currently going up the hill that's used by students, that we ought to accommodate that, because that's what's being used by some number of students. It's not,
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
Well, because I I was 16 years old once, and I know the way I would deal with it is I would then be hopping the guardrail. And so that's what's gonna end up happening, and I think it's, it's a better situation to have a narrow opening that people can go through. They're already using the path. That's my take on it.
Yeah.
You deal, there's the perfect world, and then there's reality.
I think you're trying to guide people to where you want them to walk.
Well, the reason why they do that is because their alternative is to walk 200 or 300 yards that way, or 200 or 300 yards that way. So they basically come up the middle and save themselves a quarter mile of walking.
Yeah. All right, any other questions on that?
What's the new revised assumed price? Not 125, with the rail alone would be 39,000 plus end caps at so much, so.
Yeah, so we're probably 45 or somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I mean, I think until the premier fence has actually been on the site and seen it, I think it's kind of, I think that's in the ballpark of, 45.
So we're voting a number or just a concept?
No,
or-
we're just voting to allow the work to be done.
Yeah, just where it's within a public right of way.
I mean, the DPW budget would,
Well, no,
accommodate
man,
this
it's gotta
around, yeah.
be able to be accommodated within the DPW budget.
yeah, or
Or the
the,
RAP funds.
Well, but it sounds like the RAP funds have problems timing, and they're already potentially expended, so.
yeah, but I mean, I think it's up to the DPW,
Okay.
how they want to do the funding. All right, you guys want to make a motion?
Sure.
Either.
Okay, yeah, well, I move that we approve the use of RAP funds and or DPW budgeted funds to construct guardrail along the westerly edge of Farm Lane.
So
1,032.
we're not actually
Well,
approving the use of the money, we're just allowing them
Work in the
to
town
install the
side.
guardrail in the town right away, or the town roads, right?
Yep.
Okay. You want to amend?
when you say we're not actually approving the money, I guess.
We're not, the motion, I don't think the motion should be to approve, to allow DPW to use the funds, because they're in charge of their own operating budget. We're just saying it's okay to do that,
Allow me
to install the guardrails in the town road,
Okay,
or.
who are the RAP funds?
It's effectively like chapter 90 money.
Okay,
it's-
so it goes directly to DPW.
Yeah, that's how it's been handled.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be authorized by the select.
No, it's really just the work.
Okay, I was assuming that those funds, okay,
And because of the, slope issues, I wanted to make sure that, we were affirmatively approving it prior to.
Yeah. okay, all right, so I accept your friendly revision of my motion.
Okay. Did you already second, Chris?
I will second.
Okay, any further discussion? I just have a question. If this vendor thinks that the slope is too steep, I assume they'll say so, and then we'll revisit this.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, that would be my,
All right,
yeah,
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
great, thank you.
Okay, so we will move on to item K, committee charges. And looking ahead to FY 24 appointments and reappointments. So. This is,
It's a lot lengthier than I had envisioned, but it's hard to.
but it's all there.
I think it's awesome, but, our new assistant town clerk really did an enormous amount of work in a very short amount of time.
Yeah,
I retooled it a little bit,
Mhm.
I think, I'd love to condense it, but at least at the same time, like you said, it's all there, so.
yeah, I was just wondering if somehow we could make it so that each committee has a consistent.
Yeah.
Because just by, default, some committees have more information. I'm wondering if there can be like an attachment that has all the legislation support or whatever.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
there's definitely some reformatting that, we'd like to do before something's like. brought
Yeah,
forward.
Yeah.
This is purely his first whack at it.
I mean, it's great. I mean, everything is there. You guys have any initial?
I couldn't get through it all today. I asked Angus how much we dove into this because there's a ton here.
Yeah, I
And that-
think the idea is to just start looking at it and.
Right,
you
yeah,
know,
that's what he said, so we'll
Yeah.
get to, but I think it's great, I think it ought to be put together once it's fully done as a separate booklet, you know?
Yeah,
Additionally, for our purposes, before June 30th, you can ignore the elected section,
mhm,
because you really don't
Right,
care about their charges in the sense of they operate on their own elected
Yes.
bodies. It's really just a.
that's pointed, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm part of, the direction we're looking for is as Jim's office is reaching out to applicants for reappointment. In the past, reappointment often, people are always welcome, but they're not actually encouraged to attend meetings. So the thought was, does the board want to, with either all or some of the committees, invite in potentially the full committee to have more of a discussion of objectives for next year. That's not something that's happened, at least in the last 5 years. I don't know if it happened before then. I don't really think it did. So I think that's some of the direction we're looking for is you and I, either invite committees, suggestions as to objectives for next year or offer your own direction on that.
I think, I mean, I would like to solicit input from the committees about what they think, and then we can, discuss it and see if we're in alignment with that. I think that's an important thing.
yeah, what you don't want is, we definitely don't want committees going out sort of concert purposes
Mhm.
with select board.
And if also, if there are things that we think are important that aren't being attended to, maybe that's a good
Yeah.
opportunity to redirect. It's probably not practical for us to meet with every committee before June 30th, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably impossible, actually.
But so maybe I don't know if we just, and it doesn't have to happen by June 30th, I think.
Reappointments.
Reappointment, yeah, but in terms of,
We could do like invite a couple of chairs per meeting and go through that way.
Yeah.
We could do anyone who's newly appointed, you want to talk to them within the year. It really is up to you guys.
Right now, June 30th, we have what, 2 meetings?
yeah.
So 2 committee chairs per meeting is 4.
No, but I mean, within the next year.
Okay.
So like a review process. So like
Yeah, I think to get all the committees by end of next, yeah, I think
Before
that's,
next June.
yeah.
Big project, so that'd be better time.
But I think it's important, I mean, there's some committees in here that I think we should dissolve because a lot of this was pre-town manager,
Yeah.
and some of the functions that we relied on
Right, the
committees.
personnel committee,
Yeah.
has no function at this point.
So is that something that,
Maybe that's the place to start, right?
Yeah.
Which committees are redundant or not
Yeah.
necessary.
Yeah, and you could dissolve them prior to any reappointments.
for the coming
Yeah.
fiscal year? So, I mean, another thing we might want to look at is there some duplication between committees? Like we have a lot of, like the open space committee, the Mill Pond committee, Park and Rec, they all have functions that overlap. I mean, I don't know if it's worth looking at.
That's interesting too, because not only do they have functions that overlap, they have. Right, they have at least perceptions of conflict and as a consequence, when there's anything that has to be done
Mhm.
that requires consensus of those committees, almost inevitably, it seems to not get done.
Yeah,
It ends up stalemated.
I don't know if there's any other examples, but I think those are the kinds of things that would be good to think about. That takes a little more conversation than
Yeah.
personnel committee can go, but. Chris, did you see any other committees that you think we could just eliminate? That's the only one that I saw.
I wasn't looking at it with that perspective, so I didn't, I was looking, my first cleanup is composition of the committees and it also would be in what time frame, because some revolve, and if we looked at the list last week, some of them were all at once, so
Yeah,
that would be helpful to see that in there. I know that's just, this is a draft, it's a good start, but that's information. No, I think we would maybe start considering looking at which committees could be combined or
mhm.
It also might be a good time to revisit sizes of committees as well.
Yeah,
which the Looking at something, I'm like,
I'd offer you some water, but that's my water bottle.
the FinCom at 6 was always an odd number.
Yeah,
Right.
so that would require a bylaw change though, right?
Right.
But if we think it should be done.
Was it?
Actually, an even number.
Curious number that.
Even number is odd.
I mean, it's strange. Yeah, and even they are still saying, why do we have 6?
Yeah.
It doesn't help.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, you wonder what was the rationale originally for that.
so Jim, do you happen to know how many committees that are appointed by the select board? I'm just looking for the summary table, just to know if we're gonna divide it by, 3 committees a month or something.
Sure. So I think I'm counting 22, but that includes like Whittier School Committee, I think that's overstating.
I was gonna say, did you guys appoint Whittier? I thought that was a change.
It wasn't in here, so
I think
added
school
it.
committee does.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the school committees that are appointing authority for that one, technically.
Oh, the Kentucky School Committee, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So any thoughts on how to organize this, if we are gonna, assuming we're gonna take, a handful of committees or 1 or 2 periodically? Combine them by like the function or just randomly select them?
There is an alphabet.
I was gonna say, I think if you did something like characters, that may be beneficial to say, yeah, you guys really do the same thing, why do you exist separately from each other?
Yeah,
The complementary things, yeah, there's a lot. So, I mean, I can tell you that, the Mill Pond Management Plan definitely, vests in different committees, different roles and responsibilities, and that, sometimes ends up being, illustrating some differences and, how some of the committees view things. I definitely think, Mill Pond, Open Space, Concom, Park and Rec, and this board, I mean, that's something that standing on its own could really, could justify a lot of effort to try to get some better alignment among on how that land is managed, including like use requests and things. Seems like there's some perception of overlap anyway between like River Access Committee and Open Space Committee. River Access Committee brought forward a proposal last summer that ended up kind of running aground.
just full of them tonight, aren't you?
I think you could come up with some, groupings of, not a small number of groupings. Some of these committees are, as you know, really, really active and really very well fleshed out work programs. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think others, and not to pick on anyone, but Harbor Committee is one that really hardly meets, hasn't really met in response to, a number of questions that have been raised on how we issue more permits and so forth. The conservation agent, I have had some meetings on that. That's one where I think it'd be really helpful if this board set out, something that you hope that they will do next year so that they're given some direction. I think to some extent, we had that discussion a year ago.
Yeah,
That I don't think they'd probably string a meeting in that point.
right.
I've met with the chair a couple of times. I don't know where he stands on things, but in terms of that committee actually like completing a charge, it's not really happening.
Mhm.
I think it was more relevant back when we had a boat. Pump out boat and all that.
All right, so we need to come up with some kind of grouping or just do it alphabetically. But I think we need to figure out how many committees per month or some schedule.
I was gonna say, if you wanna just give me a number and I could come up with some, a schedule or something like that with Max and You guys can
How
tweak
about just starting with a spreadsheet, list the committees, a number of people on it, and then we can sort of look and see if they valid to keep in, keep or condense. Start there, and then you could have a column which dates you want to do each one.
Mhm.
So if you have at least a spreadsheet that just was very rudimentary to start with.
Yeah.
Put it all on one page and you can see where you're at and
It's actually where we began.
Well, but this is all good
It can-
background.
No, it is, it's great.
Yeah.
it can be the index for this book.
Yeah.
Yeah. One note, I'll just offer the personnel committee, since that is a creation of bylaw, it's not something that can just be, done away with, but the bylaw provides that the personnel committee shall be composed of such a number of members for such periods of time as the select board shall so determine.
Yeah, notice that today. So I was thinking that such number should be zero for 0 days.
And that was the decision the board made a year ago, was to not appoint a personnel committee for FY 23, which I think was, made sense. Because there's still a housekeeping matter, and I think that there could be a valuable role for a personnel committee with a somewhat different charge than the bylaws that out.
Mhm. So if we're going to invite committees to participate in this review, maybe like a standard form that they each fill out, like what they think their charge is or what their goals are or something.
standard questionnaire.
Yeah, that, at least that way then we'd be asked the same questions or where to draw from.
I mean, just, not that this was asked, but just two committees you should group, or we should group, would be Climate Change Resiliency Committee and Energy and Sustainability Committee the same night, seeing as there are 4 common members between the two committees. They really do have separate functions, so they're not, and,
Anything else that could be kind of combined with that, or do you think 2 a night is enough?
with other agenda items. which we like will be plenty.
I think Chris, right, yeah.
All right. All right, if you want to take a crack at that, Jen, that'd be great.
One thing that I started doing a few years ago, and I've never actually, brought it forward and presented it, but when I was new here and trying to get a handle on who's who and who does what, I put together a little matrix of all the committees and then all the department heads, and just did a little X's and O's in terms of whether departments provide either dedicated support to a board commissioner committee would be an X, or whether they had a supportive role where from time to time they might help, and I put a little O. And then I had a third one of whether, even if that relationship did not exist at that point, whether as town manager I felt it should,
Mhm.
and I had a third indicator for that. I never shared that because there were a lot of dynamics, and it's not like I was in charge anyway, so it was really more just my own trying to think about how this organization works. And so much has changed since then. I mean, for instance, with our conservation agent, that individual is very hands-on with all the things that I think they should be, right? And so a lot's changed since then, so that would need to be dusted off. But I do think that having some clarity on which offices have kind of a, like which offices are going to all the meetings of a board commissioner committee, or which have a more of a sporadic as needed, support role, I think would be helpful. Thankfully, we have a lot of people on staff right now who are really helpful and are going to do what they can to help, but I think everyone's juggling different directives. And so the more that I can do as manager to give clear direction to departments of what the expectations are, I think it's helpful to make sure that we can calibrate what they're working on to the resources that they have. Because some offices have, 80 hours a week of combined staffing. Some offices have 20 hours total staffing in a week. So the resource, it's not apples to apples, and we want to make sure that the, largest supports provided by those offices with the greatest capacity to provide support.
Mhm. So could you also see designating a staff person for each committee? So,
I think it's helpful to have somebody who's at least keeping their ear to the ground, even if they're not going to meetings. I think that's A, it's not needed, and B, it would drive hours and that we don't really have the staffing to keep up with, but I think it's important for somebody, that there's some durable connection between the activities of the committees and the kind of staff team, so that we can have alignment and don't trip over each other or potentially work at cross purposes because we don't know what's in store here.
So the name maybe else pick up things from Angus's plate.
Well, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, we made some progress on that,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's definitely committees on here that, as a practical matter, I've provided a lot of support to, but over time, if we're gonna continue to have those committees, and if they're gonna need support, it might be good at some point to have that be somebody's job to do that, and not just the town manager. Harbor Committee is a great example. I think I've been to all their meetings over, not that there have been a lot of them, but there's probably met, a dozen times in the 5 years I've been here, and I've been to all those meetings, or, some of the others, where there really wasn't anybody on staff who perceived that they had anything to do with that committee. I would kind of make it my business to go, just to learn who they are, what to do, and then once I started going, then I get kind of pulled in,
Expect you to.
and then I'm, and you don't want to pull back. So
maybe that could be a column spreadsheet as well, the staff. All right,
Yeah, that actually would be helpful.
to know who's the
Yeah.
go-to
Yeah,
person.
exactly.
Yeah, question.
they need copies made of something.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, anything else on that? Looks like we have somewhat of a plan. All right.
Yeah, sounds good.
Right. So will we start reviewing appointments then at the next meeting, or how is that gonna work?
It's really up to you as chair. I
many do
would, I
we
would
have?
think so.
Yeah.
I don't think we'd want to push those all off till June 27th.
Say we,
26th.
I think the last packet you had a list of kind of who is up.
Yeah,
So I can contact everyone on the list and see who's available,
mhm.
have them show up. Or we can just do in mass, it's up to you guys.
Well, they don't have to show up, they could just send a letter of their intent if they'd like to be reappointed or not.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so anyone who gets back to me by the next meeting, you can put on the agenda.
Yeah.
If that works.
So there's still an application, even if it's a reappointment, right?
In the past, I think it was just a, hey, are you still interested?
So just.
Yeah, it's
like
been
everything-
Right.
Okay, so they were just.
I think back 5 or 6 years ago, I think there was, and those are some of the things that with all the churn that went on in the various offices,
Yeah,
that kind of broke down. So I think we've been much more informal. If someone expresses their interest, that's fine, as long as, but
Well, if they're a new committee member, it's good to see who they are. know
Yeah,
who
we
they
also
are.
held off a couple of appointments to June essentially because they were gonna be appointed.
tree committee and also with
Council on Aging.
planning.
But, so I guess it was the third year I was on the board, no, it was the second year I was on the board, the year that I was chair.
2 years.
Yeah, 2 years ago, so it was the third year I was on the board, and I, naively thought, well, okay, so we'll, not really having much of a model to follow, or having enough memory of the model to follow, thought that, well, let's just talk with everybody, with each person. And that immediately blows up to much more than you want to get involved with. So, it seems to me that the en masse, reappointment, unless there's a specific reason to talk with an individual, makes a lot more sense.
yeah, so that's what we need to figure out. So maybe I can work with you on that.
Sure.
If there are specific people we want to talk to, then we would invite them to come in.
I was gonna say, if there's particular committees that like you really have questions about, I would say we should get those out of the way.
Yeah,
But if it's a functioning committee and you feel that it's doing its job, maybe that one can be held off until
the
a
last
meeting in the
meeting.
future to be able to question the chairs and kind of get a vision for what they want their committee to be or what you want their committee to be.
I would suggest for this year, you just do the reappointments for people who want it. Let's sort out the committees and the charges, and at that point, we can
Yeah,
then take a deeper dive on appointments and reappointments the following year.
I think there may be a couple of ones that we want to consider more deeply.
That's fine, and
Yeah.
that would be the only caveat, is if you've got issues or thoughts or considerations of things that aren't getting done, let's bring them in
Okay,
conversation.
all right, so we want to just work together on that for the next meeting and,
Yeah, absolutely. I'll,
Okay.
I'll reach out now and see who's interested.
okay,
And then, anyone I don't hear back from, we can push off till the 30th.
Okay.
And when we do hear back from that we want to bring in, we'll ask them to come in.
all right, anything else on that? What are you smiling at? Just happy to
No,
be
it's a
here.
good, yeah, no, it's a good process. It's good. It's all good.
All right, what's next? Confirmation of select board member roles and Memorial Day ceremony.
Yeah, we've often just handed these out the morning of, or where this. Just, so there's a whole kind of program for the ceremony, and this is just the excerpt.
Yeah, so as the new member, you do everything.
Well, from a distance, because I won't be around.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you're not around?
No.
Okay, I think you must have told me that before.
Yeah, I did really think so.
Okay.
This is like, well, when I have things scheduled that I didn't know I was gonna be doing this, so hopefully next year we'll have a cleaner slate to start with.
Okay. I do have a question on this. So at some point, the decision must have been made to read, all names of people deceased in the town versus just veterans.
Yes,
And when was that made, last year or?
no, that was made
A long
years
time ago.
before I was here.
I used to think it was veterans, and I think I had that wrong. I don't know.
I thought it, well, so I had got some feedback last year that people with a recently deceased person didn't realize that their name was gonna be read out loud, and it was quite upsetting for them.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't, of course, it wasn't intentional, but I just wondered if at some point it had been decided to just, to read everybody. instead
So,
of-
yeah, that was the well, what I had asked, that was the practice in previous years, and it was the previous year's deceased members of West Newbury, essentially.
Yeah, okay.
And so the idea would be, if anyone was recently deceased, as in within the next month or so, that they wouldn't have been skipped or missed.
Mhm.
So that's why it was the previous year, because that's an easy list for me to be able to pull. I don't think
Okay.
anyone considered.
Was last year the year that there were three?
Yeah.
years? That was like, yeah.
This year will be, I want to say 12 people, it's not a large number,
Mhm.
because it's only 1 year.
Right. So Rick, I guess this is just you and I to figure out who's gonna do what.
You can have it.
So we have
Okay.
to, I'll just introduce two readers, introduce the Grand Marshal, and ask for veterans to stand. And the welcome by the select board chair, is that something I have to write?
You could probably add lib.
I was gonna say, Archie just had
I don't ad lib well.
it.
Talk
Sure, that's
about,
a shock.
talk about answering cricket or something, it'd be like, Archie's still here.
All right, do we have to decide this tonight?
No.
If we don't, we'll decide it next week, right?
Keep it in your head.
All right, what do you wanna do? I think we should decide. Just alternate?
Sure, as long as you do the first one.
All right,
I'll, that could work, or just for, so we're not back and forth too
tripping over
much.
each other, yeah.
Yeah, if you wanted to do the first, then I'd introduce the whoever's gonna read Flanders Field, and we shall keep the faith.
All right, I'll do the Grand Marshal. You ask the veterans to stand,
Sure,
alternate, and then.
okay. And then, seeing as you're the welcome, you probably ought to, as chair, should probably be the one who says thanks for
Okay,
attending.
all right, so then you read the names,
Okay,
ask for veterans to stand and then read the names,
okay,
all right?
sure.
Okay,
So, do we want to cut anyone who is not a veteran, or do we want to read the whole list?
No, I just wanted to ask a question.
Sure.
That's, I don't.
I was very off, it was 31.
31.
The past, last
Yeah. To me, you know, it being Memorial Day, sort of a, you know, a veteran related holiday. Or memorial holidays, shouldn't be considered to be a holiday, I guess. It seems to me as though, referencing veterans' names is, instead of everybody's, is more appropriate. It just strikes me that way. Though I don't want to give short shrift to anybody's, you know, passing. So I don't know.
I agree with you, but you're changing, what has been a tradition. It would
Yeah.
unnerve a lot of people too, so you have to be cautious with that.
So it's been a long time.
From what I understood, but I can triple check and see how long it's been a tradition. But from what I found, it's the full list.
Okay,
I'm not gonna, you know, not gonna fight that point. That's fine.
yeah, I kind of agree with you, but
Yeah.
I think Chris is right. We don't want to change something less than.
Without, yeah, somehow easing into it, 'cause
Yeah.
it might upset certain people, I don't know.
Yeah,
And so what is the cutoff then? What,
Is the calendar year.
the calendar? year?
Yeah.
Okay.
So January.
Okay, all right, so in calendar year 2022, okay.
all right. Is that it on that one? Okay. And so what time do we need to be there?
Kickoff is 10:30 from.
Right,
But,
but
no, but arrive no later than 10.
10 o'clock, okay. Great, hopefully it's not as hot as it was last Memorial Day.
Yeah.
I got such a sunburn, sitting in the front steps of the library.
Well, it's like weirdly reflecting.
It was,
right where you
yeah.
guys were.
Yeah,
it was
so
Pretty
I
unbearable.
remember to wear a hat, bring a good sun hat. I had a hat last year, I think, or I had something.
I was holding my program over my head.
Yeah, right.
All right, minutes. You said these so quick. Pretty awesome,
Yeah, he's already done two others, from what I understand.
great.
He's almost got tonight's done, right?
It was done 10 minutes ago. Yeah.
All right, any comments, changes?
No, look good to me.
A question, I think the minutes are great. Executive session minutes, what's the process with those?
They stay in executive session till.
Until
we vote to
they're
release.
released, until the matter.
But do we not approve them? Because,
Not an open session, no.
no, but even in executive session, I haven't seen minutes to approve. I don't know how far down the road you get, and then my memory's gone. And
Right,
I haven't approved them.
It's been a bandwidth issue. But we can,
No, I just don't know how far down the road it gets, like when was the last time? you approved?
There are no, technically, there are no votes in executive session. In the sense of, if you have a vote in executive session, you need to then bring it into open session. So any minutes you approve for executive session, you then have to bring to open session in a way. So we can provide them for review, but until you want to release them.
Right, I understand the necessity of releasing them, but if you don't approve them or see them in a timely fashion, my memory won't be as crisp and clear 3 months from, or, you know, whatever. So I just curious.
Yeah, it's, Angus and I are the only ones who attend, so we're the only ones who can write minutes. So, unless one of the board members would like to,
I couldn't hear you.
I said unless one of the. Assist,
It's a long distance between.
that would be the only other option.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the May 9th meeting is submitted.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, and then I think the rest is updates, I guess.
yeah, so, going ahead with the DPW director, search process, have, second round interviews starting this week. That will extend into next week. And, had previously, advised that, interviews would take place in the board meeting. We've received clarification from town council that as department head, the town manager is appointing authority, so I would intend to proceed with the process with daytime interviews, and Rick is going to be sitting in on the second round interviews, and we'll see coming out of that, you know, how, you know, whether it be I think the goal would be to make an appointment in early June, with ideally someone starting in early July. That will depend on the candidate, what kind of notice they need to provide, but we're going forward with that. Next item, just the fiscal year end memo that went around to all department heads, and I'm working with Jenny to make sure that gets to all of the chairs of any commissions or committees that oversee budgets. In general, the department heads have been good at understanding the year ends deadlines, and we need to make sure that gets out to all the boards and committees as well, because we have in the past had occasionally an invoice that will come in after July 15th, which can be it's a real problem. So working with Jenny to get her the email addresses of all the chairs so we can get that year end memo circulated to everybody. Okay, good. Yeah, there's a lot that comes to the end of the fiscal year, so definitely a busy time for the finance department. I think that's all I've got. I've got a whole list of other things we're working on, but
Okay,
it's nothing you haven't heard about before.
great. Any items for the next meeting agenda? Either of you want to add?
General question, maybe
Sure.
it goes on the next, maybe it's just a simple yes or no. Can ARPA funds be used if we wanted to do a comprehensive plan for that?
I think they can be used for anything since we declared ourselves,
So the revenue replacement.
yeah.
Some point that might be worth considering.
Yeah, I'll do a conversation. It's a,
I
that's
think
something we definitely need to do, but that they're,
I talked to the planning board a year and a half ago, and they had timing issues, and then it became a money issue. It's gonna be not inexpensive.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure if town meeting would stand up and fund. I think we're looking at 150,000-ish. But if you have ARPA funds available, the process is simpler and cleaner, and I think it's 1999 was the last one.
Right.
We're definitely overdue.
A lot of issues that seem to conflict with each other, that if we had a plan, some clarity going forward might be helpful.
It's interesting. So a comprehensive plan, you know, if we do get serious about talking about town charter, you know, the two done somehow, not necessarily concurrently, but you know, the two interact, or should interact, I think.
Be a good idea, right?
Yeah.
The comprehensive plan is supposed to be comprehensive.
Right, right.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah, so I don't know how we,
I think in the short term, we have so many housing things going on.
Yeah.
That I think those should be wrapped up before we move into any other kind of, you know, large planning.
I'm
effort.
not saying it has to start today or tomorrow, I'm saying just start the process, and if that funding could be available for it, that makes it pretty nice.
yeah.
Yeah, but all the, how, there's a lot of people's time is taken up on those.
Well, also the public, I mean, there's only so much.
It's kind of unfortunate you couldn't have the comprehensive plan first to,
Yeah.
you know, facilitate the others, but it's just the way it is, but.
Yeah.
It's something I'm a fan of, obviously. I think it worked pretty good from 1999 to today, but I think a lot of it is faded.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of things that, you know, environmental issues that come to the forefront much
Yeah,
more.
no, a lot of things have changed. Interestingly, you know, it's funny, I mean, on numerous occasions, I've had people poo-poo the comprehensive plan we did in 99. And, you know, say it was a waste of time, but you look at it, and you point to it and say, look at what's here, and look at how much we actually accomplished that was here, you know, so.
There was I know that it came to the select board a few years ago for funding, and that was the comment that it didn't. The town didn't grow as the plan had assumed it might.
Right.
But what the problem, that was a mistake because the plan laid out an action plan in the back and said if the town addresses some of these tasks, it
The
can
growth,
control
yeah,
its growth.
right.
And the town did. We, set up a $5 million land fund to purchase some open spaces that were significant. The Open Space Committee did a lot of programs with people who had large parcels to make contributions and donations and restrictions on the land. We rewrote the zoning and the subdivision regs at the time, which helped. And
With
then another-
OSPD and that kind of stuff.
yeah, and another thing which they pointed out in the comprehensive plan, that this is valid until you have an economic downturn. We had an economic downturn.
Right.
So a lot of things came into play, and I agree with you that when you go back and look at it, particularly in the immediate short term, probably the first 8 to 10 years, it was significantly valuable and used. And then it's faded, so that's why a lot of things get squishy now. But I think the plan was very valuable at the time, and I think it has a lot to do with why West Newbury still looks and feels the way it does today. So, yeah, to those who want to critique it, that's my response.
Mhm. So one thing we've talked about on and off is a list of potential ARPA projects. I mean, before we commit to spending money on something, I think,
Yeah,
yeah, let's adjust. So maybe for
Yeah.
our next meeting, could we each think about potential projects and just kind
I'm done.
of. All right, all right, Chris. Meeting adjourned.
No, I just meant as far as the ARPA funds, because to me, that's the most magnificent bang you'll get for your buck.
Mhm.
And to not have to convince the town meeting, and everything else, and it is a big number that a lot of people might find not worthy
Yeah.
of the expenditure.
Yeah, but if there was something else that, a larger,
Right, no, like I
Ticket.
said, I asked earlier about the Middle Street Bridge and
Yeah.
using it, that doesn't fix that problem
yeah,
or that gap enough, so I'm not sure you want to, use your ammunition there, so.
yeah,
But if you have other projects, yeah, that'd be a better subject than just that one,
yeah,
the agenda, that's a good idea.
all right. Anything else?
Move, adjourn.
All right. All in favor?
Did I second or?
Yes, I saw your mouth move.
Oh, okay, I'll second.
All right.
Nice.
Aye, aye.